To the Australia-India Business Exchange event on opportunities and innovation in the Australian METS sector. Stand by, we'll be starting soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar on opportunities in METS in India, hosted to you today by AsiaLink Business and delivered in partnership with Austrade. And I'm very pleased to be here. We're coming to you from Melbourne and we have participants from all around Australia and in Asia and in India. So a very warm welcome to all the participants on this session today. My name is Robert Law. I am your host for today and I'm Head of Advisory and Insights at AsiaLink Business. I want to begin today's session by acknowledging that I'm presenting to you from the land of the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I also want to begin today's session by acknowledging the terrible COVID situation that is occurring in India. You would have seen, if you're in Australia, a lot of media coverage about this in recent days and weeks. So our thoughts and our sympathies go out to both presenters and participants who are in India who are being affected by this. We are fortunate to have several of our presenters be based in India join us today. And we thank them for making the time. They are doing this from their homes as they are in lockdown. So something important just to bear in mind as we get into this webinar. And we will touch on the impacts of COVID when it comes to doing business. I think it's worth quickly outlining the great speakers that we have assembled for you today to share their insights and their expertise and their experience around the mining and MET sector in India. First off, we have Dr. Vanessa Guthrie, who holds a number of roles as chairperson and non-executive director across a number of companies in the Australian resources, energy and mining sectors. She brings over 30 years experience in this industry, and we are very honoured to have her join us today. I also want to welcome Niladri, who is the lead partner with KPMG for metals and mining, and who is based in India. We also have Simon Askey Doran. He is General Manager for Business Development for RPM Global. Good to have you with us, Simon. We've got Will Robinson, who is Chief Sales Officer from Real Time Group. And we have Tim White, who is the Trade and Investment Commissioner with Austrade, based in New Delhi. I've not given an extensive introduction about these individuals, but when I pass over to them shortly, they can tell you a little bit about more about themselves and their companies. So I do want to extend our appreciation to all the speakers who are joining us today. We're very grateful for you sharing your time and insights with us. Just a few things about how today's session will run before we get into the discussion. Firstly, we'd love to get your questions. So some of you have submitted some questions in advance. We've pulled some of those out and we'll be asking those of the panel. Please do put any more questions that you have into the chat function. Something that I'd note for today's session is that we have also enabled the chat function. Sometimes you get on these webinars and the chat function is disabled. We've decided that it's best if you want to use that chat function and network and you want to introduce yourself to other participants on this webinar, please go ahead and do that. If you feel comfortable putting in your name and your organisation, you are welcome to do so. You're also under no obligation to do so. But, we have found in the past that some people do like to use these for a bit of networking and introductions. Lastly, just a reminder that this session is being recorded. So now that we've got the introduction and the formalities out of the way, I'd like to get into the subject matter that we're all interested in today. And I want to start with you, Vanessa. You bring over 30 years experience working in this sector, and you've worked across, you know, Australia and many countries in the Asia Pacific region. Could you tell us a little bit about how you see the opportunity in India relevant to, say, other markets in Asia?
Sure. Hi, Rob, and thank you for the introduction and for the question. And my apologies that I am not able to start my video. There
we can hear you, and we can now see you. Great.
Now you can see me as well. There you go. So thanks for the intro. Look, my experience includes having worked with partners in a number of different Asian countries, in particular Japan, China, Korea, and of course India. So when we think about the Indian market and the growing potential that the Indian market represents to Australia, I think you have to take a view of what is the best way for Australia to enter that market or to engage with that market. And if you think back over time, foreign direct investment into Australian mining markets with the US, for example, very early on, and then Japan, is always around an equity investment, forming a strategic investor partnership that enabled them to take offtake of whatever product we produced. And it was always very much an export orientation. If we think about how we've positioned as Australian mining and METS into China, it's been very much about a key customer relationship where we've provided a good or a service, mainly goods in terms of export materials. And some of those key customer relationships have been built around an investment of China into Australia, but dominantly it's around a one-way flow of customer. The other parts of Asia where the Australian markets entered has been places like in Africa, and of course then the same model in Southeast Asia, where Australian companies would go into those countries, take an equity position or an investment position in that country and develop the mineral resources on behalf of the local community or potentially a partner. So thinking about India, none of those models alone actually will work in India. And my experience of going to India a few times around this, looking for ways in which to engage in the mining and minerals industry, it's really very much about partnerships. There is not a straight invest. You cannot go into India with a view that you will just invest on behalf of others and repatriate the benefits back to an Australian company. You do need a local partner on the ground, and I'm assuming, and I'm sure that our fellow panelists would reinforce that, particularly those who are in India. There is a key supply chain, a value chain from Australian resources into India, but in the context that India has a very strong view of self-reliance, and India is incredibly rich with resources that are generally either underdeveloped or not developed. And so the Australian entry into this market, it is a market with great growth potential and a very exciting market, but the approach has to be a very different one to where we've entered Southeast Asia or our relationships in China or Japan. It has to be one of partnership with a local partner. It has to be one of an investment, a two-way investment, and if you like, a two-way flow of either and both our resources and our experience and expertise into India to assist India to build in my own mining industry in a self-reliant way. So a very different model to what we've seen elsewhere, but one that is quite comprehensive, I think, and takes a lot of time to build. You have to be patient and persistent in coming back to India time and time again.
I think that's a really important point, Vanessa. And I think if Australian companies can not just talk the partnership talk, but really put it into practice in India, it has the potential to be a differentiator for us. When I look at, across the sort of the competitor space in METS, often you think of the Canadians in, say, exploration technology, maybe the Japanese in the equipment space. But how else can Australian companies differentiate themselves? What are, if we build on that partnership approach, what are the other areas where we can have a comparative advantage?
I think part of our comparative advantage actually does lie in the technology space and the METS, the services part. In particular, you mentioned Canada and exploration technology, but Australia has, the wonderful thing about Australia and India is that we have incredibly similar geology, and therefore we have exactly the same challenges in terms of developing mineral resources in the ground, or very, very similar. Australia has developed great exploration techniques, for example, under deep weathered cover, to be able to find some of our most recent ore bodies, world-class ore bodies in Australia. The same challenges will be present in India. We also have a METS sector that is world-class and in fact leading in terms of mineral processing and mineral extraction. So the development of new technologies around, in particular, those new critical minerals areas, the extraction of lithium, the extraction of rare earths, the purification of rare earths, and the movement of those through the value chain to the demand that might be in India. Coupled with that, and again, my fellow panelists will, I'm sure, shed a lot more light on this, the ability for us to leverage our own network of automation and technology development within Australia to improve our productivity can be replicated with partners in India, including not just the actual technology itself, but the technical services and the professional services that underpin and go behind that. Our record in safety, in environmental management and mine land rehabilitation, our record in productivity gains and automation in terms of both bulk and also small pit and underground is just, we have an incredible platform with which to help the Indian mining industry actually grow from what is might be regarded as a subsistence or a small M mining industry to being a quite high capability. And that's where the great opportunity for the METS sector lies.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'd like to move on now to ask some questions of our next panelist. But just before I do, a reminder for those who have just joined us, you're welcome to put questions that you might have into the chat. If you want to direct those to a particular panelist, please just indicate who you'd like to have that question directed to. You're welcome to also introduce yourself if you feel comfortable to do so. There's no obligation. But I think now that we've sort of taken that broad regional view, I'd really like to speak a little bit about recent developments in India. So Niladri, we'd love to hear, based on all your experience as the lead partner for metals and mining at KPMG India, could you tell us about some of the recent policy developments and any opportunities that might have come about as a result?
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon, everyone on the call. I hope you're all safe. Let me first set a little bit of context. If you look at India, India has significant amount of resources, as Vanessa just mentioned, but much of it is unexplored, much of it is unproduced. For instance, if you look at India's rare earth reserves, they are perhaps more than that of Australia. But in terms of production, we are not even 1/10. So that is the paradox of India, I would put it that way. India has, I think, the third or the fourth largest coal reserve in the world, and yet it is one of the largest importers of coal. So this is the paradox of India. And the Indian government now recognizes it. Indian mining sector contributes less than 2% or around that 2% plus to India's GDP. And India has what they call as a national think tank called Niti Aayog, which in its earlier avatar was called the Planning Commission. They have set out some targets. They have said that we need to take India's mining sector growth, which is absolutely abysmal in the last few years, 2% to 3%. We want to take it to 15%. Now, when they've put these targets, what they have done is that they have asked all the central and the state governments to work out ways and means to, number one, improve exploration, number two, do different things that come in the way of taking this mineral out of the ground. Now, if you look at what prevents minerals from being taken out from the ground, are our land laws, are our environmental laws. Now, there are a host of changes that are happening. They have already started happening in the last few years, and they are going to continue. And we have a good insight into the mind of the government because they put out consultation papers. If you care to look through the web, you will find out consultation papers put out by different ministries about forthcoming changes in the laws. So let me give you a quick snapshot of what are some of these changes that have recently happened or are likely to happen in the future. So first of all, they're going to be putting some production incentive on early production. So if a mine has been awarded out and you are supposed to start production in say 50 months, so you get some incentive to start producing say in the 40th month, right? Second point, India has already started moving on the path of putting a full stop on captive mining. They are migrating towards commercial mining. So captive mining will be stopped by law going forward. All mines will be meant for commercial use. Yes, it's a different matter that you sell to your own self, but everything will be commercial mining going forward. Earlier, what used to happen is that these captive blocks would be awarded out, and then for some reason, if the end-use industry is affected because of something, say steel prices tank, so production in steel mines go down, and that resource remains underutilized. So to prevent all those situations, everything is going to be captive. Everything is going to be commercial, non-captive mining. Third thing is that the government of India, looking at the slow pace of auctions that are happening, in India, mines are given out for auctions. Government of India has now proposed to bring in changes wherein for the mines that are not being successfully auctioned, they will take command and control of that mine and try to get them auctioned. And in auction rules also, Government of India has brought in multiple changes. For instance, earlier minimum 3 bidders were required. So now 2 bidders, right? Government of India is also working on simplifying of environmental clearances, forest clearances. For instance, Ministry of Coal has appointed a central PMU, Project Management Unit, to increase the pace of development of these mines. So what does it mean for METS players in Australia? So I think the one core message is that so long as this government is there, they recognize the tremendous challenge that India faces in terms of economic growth, especially in the aftermath of COVID. This has only got accentuated. The challenge is that they recognize that we need to find more sources of revenue generation and not just depend on corporate tax or direct tax and the standard goods and service tax, etc. So mineral revenues are an important source of state revenue. So they will put full force to increase the number of operational mines. They realize what is holding them back and they are trying to address it. I think one of the things that METS players need to look at is that if they can conceptualize solutions that help. And again, I'm taking off from one point that was mentioned by Vanessa, that if they can conceptualize solutions that are going to strengthen our safety, environmental protection, resource conservation, those kinds of areas, then they would find great demand in India. For instance, do you have a solution to quickly do tree counting, right? Instead of human counting one by one. So that is a basic minimum required for environmental clearance, and it takes significant amount of time. So do you have a drone-based solution or a remote sensing solution that can help do tree counting quickly? So just think about it on those terms. And it is, as Vanessa has also mentioned, that either you can try directly or you can try through some partners. And these partners need not necessarily be Indian partners. They can even be Australian companies who have been in India for some time. For instance, Simon is going to be there on this program. I think many players like Rangi, they can be your channel partners also. Just think about it, how you can work as a team, make use of each other, and try to take these solutions in front of Indian companies. One problem that Australian METS players face is the relative fame that Australian mining operations has actually got. So India looks at Australia as a leader in mining operations without really going into the details and understanding why Australia is great at mining operations. Probably one of the reasons why Australia is great at mining operations is because of the strength of its technology sector. But because of the fame that mining operations has, they do not recognize the strength of Australia in these small technologies that actually make up for this strength in overall mining. So I think it is important for METS players to now position their capabilities at the same level as mining operations. So Keys, for instance, is more famous, or Washington Group, those kinds of players are more famous in India than, let me say, your small innovators who are bringing great solutions for, say, mine water conservation or great solutions for environmental monitoring, etc. So with that, I would end my first session, hand it over to you, Robert.
Well, thank you, Niladri. And you know, the macro picture that you paint is, of course, you know, quite encouraging when it comes to the sector and the government's ambitions to grow the sector. I'm sure, and some of the recent reforms are going to create opportunities. There is, of course, the challenge of COVID, and it's very serious in India right now. If I was an Australian METS company and I was thinking about getting into the market, into the Indian market now, what advice would you give me? Is it possible? How would I go about doing it?
So I would say that India, in the middle of COVID, has moved very quickly towards digital solutions. India understands that the world is all connected now, and that we need to protect ourselves against the bigger threats to humanity, like climate change, etc. So I think if you look at these themes, then I would say that the METS players need to capitalize on these themes. So if Indian mining players are looking at more and more digital solutions, and Indian mining players are looking at more and more environmental protection and social, what shall I say, social harmony, and or let me say community development kind of solutions around those mines, then it is important for you to chase these themes. For instance, if I take digital, I think there is a tremendous opportunity right now for IoT players. So those who are making sensors, those who are making the different kinds of, let me say, middleware solutions that are going to be helping digitalize more and more mines. So if you look at some of the, what shall I say, the lead indicators, if you track tenders in India, you will see that many large public sector companies have floated tenders for digitalization, whether it is Manganese Ore India Limited or MOIL, or whether it is Coal India Limited. So they have floated tenders. These are all lead indicators. So first, the tender is going to come for this digitalization. The next wave of tenders are obviously going to be for all these sensors. So you have to position yourself quickly in the eyes of Indian companies with your solutions. And I think these are some of the themes you need to look at. And India is going to continue to push on the themes of giving away more mines and operationalizing more mines. So you have to be in front of these people somehow and explain to them that this is the basket of solutions that are available on these different themes, right? And again, I'm repeating the message which Vanessa gave, that India believes in self-reliance, India believes in safety, environmental protection, etc. These are important themes that India can learn from Australia, and Australian companies therefore will have that brand permission to say that, yeah, here I am, here is my solution, and it will be treated with a great amount of respect. And of course, subject to the financial considerations. Yeah, it has to be reasonable for India. That's a big part.
Great. Thank you, Niladri. That's really great. For those who've just joined this webinar, I just want to invite you to put any questions that you have in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourself if you're comfortable to do so. We want to take the discussion now from that sort of view of the recent policy environment and the changes that are happening in the Indian market. And we'd love to hear from you, Simon. So Simon is from RPM Global, and they're focused on data and analytics for mine operations. And I believe you have a partner office in Kolkata as well. So would love to hear about your experience developing a partnership in India and why you've chosen to go with the particular business model that you have.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Robert. Let me just introduce a little bit more about RPM. So we are a global mining technology advisory and consulting company. We've got around 23 offices in 12 countries. We've completed over about 10,000 studies in over 100 countries. We've been coming in and out of India for around 20 years, and over that time had three models, I think you'd have to be fair to say. One being direct and remote, one being a joint venture, and now partnership. Our clients over that time, and still either in India and around the world, I have to say, include companies like Tata Steel, Tata Power, ArcelorMittal, Jindal, Coal India, etc. And we are fortunate to work with a great partner, Gainwell, formerly Tractors India, in Calcutta and around India. That started, I think, with Gainwell being a user of our technology. So they use our dynamic asset management technology software in there as they manage maintenance across their Caterpillar equipment around India. So it developed from that. We saw a group who we trusted, a group of very high integrity, generosity, and we felt that that was a good way to go as we developed this next phase of our business in India. As we look at that, the key things you must need with your partner, obviously aligned values, but an aligned vision and strategy. And I think, if I reflected on prior engagements, that at some point the vision and strategy drifted apart. And at that point, you find you're going down different paths. Someone wants to develop a low cost business, for example, and someone wants to go high technology, and those things are not going to remain aligned. And so that alignment is critical. Secondly, and as I think Vanessa referred to, you do need partnerships and relationships. So with government, with advisors to clients, the clients themselves, and then being able to form alliances and partnerships with other groups in India or elsewhere to bring solutions together. So absolutely critical. And then commercial frameworks with people such that when the opportunities arise, you're ready to go. Each party will have different risks and different understanding what terms and conditions they'll accept. And so you need to have that well established in frameworks so that you can act when the time comes. Perhaps a little bit about what we have done or some of the things we're seeing. It can be both challenging and very rewarding, I'd have to say. If I wound the clock back a little, the government of India withdrew a couple of hundred mining leases back a few years ago. And I think at that time we lost $4 or $5 million worth of direct contract business and a pipeline that was getting us ready for growth. And so the clock gets reset again, and away you go again. The nature of business changes. And I guess we've seen that a number of times over the last few years. So it's great to see the government's announcements and the direction they're going in opening things up and looking at pulling which levers to make it go forward. I guess notwithstanding that, some of the things we have been able to do is to answer questions for companies like, should I make this investment in a process plant today, or can I defer it? Can I defer that couple $100 million worth of capital at another time? To which the answer was no, you need to go and do it now. You will destroy value if you don't go ahead. Things like, can we triple the size of our mine? How would we do that? What sort of technology would we employ? Do we have room and space, and how will we manage all the complexities of approvals on the way through to get a mine plan that will actually work and achieve that in line with your own approvals? What has been good, I think, and Niladri referred to it, is that we have seen from companies in relation to the incentives, this bring forward type mentality. Unfortunately, it's there's pros and cons of that. So it says, so you might have an inquiry from a client that says, could we please have a digital mine in 36 months from today, from a standing start? And so they have some real challenges about it. And so we sense there is this need to stage and work through with the end goal in mind. Yeah, how can I create incremental improvements, but with a movement towards getting all the dots joined together and moving your culture and your people and the incredible change management that would need to go about to achieve and end up at that point. Perhaps some of the things that are scary is that over years, India has bought a lot of technology, but quite often it's been sold on a bit basis. And so no one's been there to bring all the pieces together to allow that maximum output that can occur.
Just a couple of follow-up questions for you out of that, Simon. I think one of the things you touched on was price. Just would love to hear about how you go, how price sensitive is the market and how you go about pricing. And then a second question around, it was great to hear about your evolution of your business models and some honest views around some of the setbacks you had along the way and how you've had to pivot and make adjustments. You're also a listed company, so how do you sort of balance the long-term opportunity in India, but also potential shareholder views on short-term returns?
Yeah, always a challenge. So look, let me take the first one about listed company in India, and let me talk about that from two perspectives: one from governance and one from strategy. From a governance point of view, just need to be really clear that I've had some wonderful dealings in India, but during that time, I've been offered a bribe on one occasion and a few hints to people who have indicated, yeah, we know how to get things done here. And fundamentally, that's just absolutely no-go zones for us. It should be for no other company. And while there's every effort being put in place to stamp it out, in India, as it is in many other countries around the world, there is still a level of diligence required in that area, and to be aware for it as a listed company. Secondly, in relation to strategy, yeah, always a challenge, and everyone wants results faster. And but I think, as Vanessa said, there is a requirement for patience here. And to me, what that means is that you need to understand what is the environment today. So 4 or 5 years ago, we felt it was time to take the foot off the accelerator and come back a little bit while the market sorted itself out a little bit. And now, as it gets into a new pattern, to really clearly identify what those are, and then put in the level of investment that your board is happy to sanction and move forward with. And I think you need to be very clear about that and calculated about what can you invest and what return can you have. It is a time for patience, but you still need to get enough wins on the board to go, there is enough opportunity here in amongst this massive, massive opportunity that exists in India.
Yeah. And Simon, I just while we've got your question coming through on the chat, it is just to go a little deeper on the various business models that you've had, which has now resulted in the partnership. Did those shifts occur because of changes in your strategy, or because you were learning along the way, or other things?
I think there's a combination of both. Certainly from a direct to we need something is an evolution to say, yeah, we've done some projects in India, that's going okay, let's take another step. And then that step wasn't quite right. Let's now do something different. So yeah, that's how it evolved. I think, as we work with Gainwell, we also bid work with other parties. So we work with Tata Consulting Engineers, we've bid work with PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, and others over many years. And it's an opportunity arises, and you look to gather people around who can contribute to that and bring the right skills at the right time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. Really, really great insights and experience there. I'd now like to turn to Will. So Will, your company, Real Time Group, you're a manufacturer of equipment for materials analysis. What's your experience been in the market, and what advice would you have for other Australian equipment companies?
So thank you, Rob. Thanks for the introduction. Good day, everybody. What we've done is quite similar to what Simon has mentioned, is partnership, finding a good partner. My recommendation there is to, reduce your risk, and like anything in life, find the data, find the information, find a company that you can partner with. Obviously, they've got to be in the same industry as you, have the appropriate industry contacts, and then look at if you can align your goals and your vision together with that company. That is so crucial. Taking a long-term view, that it's not a short-term investment, it is a long-term view. So once you know you are really interested in the investment, then start investing, visit India, get to know the people, get to know the culture. That is crucially important. That has been for us in our learnings. And then once you invest in the company or in the country, or in terms of travel, training staff up at your local partner. So these are not joint ventures. These are agency or distributor agreements, to be more exact, whereby, agent is, they mind the business for you. You sell directly to the end user and pay them a commission, or a distributor where they on-sell your product. So they essentially buy from you and on-sell. What we typically do there is we train up their staff to do the work on the ground, to provide the after-sales service that is required for the market. Now, in saying that, is once you've established this relationship, don't hand it over to a salesperson that is just managing an account. It's not that simple. It's got to be a commitment from upper management, because as Simon has mentioned, Vanessa's mentioned, the relationship grows out of a number of different strategies. One of them being the type of reseller agreement, your pricing strategy, all of that. India is always going to throw you a curveball, from the private sector, who are easier to deal with. Government entities, my advice there would be, if you're chasing government tenders, again, take a long-term approach, visit them, go and meet with the client, get to know them throughout the company, go to the sites, go to the head offices, and build your strategy alongside with that. Now, I think earlier auctions were mentioned. I'm not sure if it was referring to reverse auctions, which is a very tough thing. Basically what it is, you for those who don't know, your product is being evaluated, and all the suppliers that are approved then get in on this reverse auction, and they just work everybody down on price. Now, in those cases, it's important that you get in on early in the project, where you can stipulate the technology, because there's a lot of technologies out there. India being a close neighbor to China, there's a lot of low-cost solutions, but probably not as well tested in, for example, mining. So the thing is there to get in early, start helping the customer decide on the right technology that is going to do the job for them, not just a technology that would provide part of the solution, because there's a lot of that going on. And then once they've wrote the specification for the product, so help them write that specification. Obviously encourage collaboration with all the suppliers, But then once you do that, they will soon find out what is really going to solve their problem. And that is where you're really getting, and then the reverse auctions aren't as onerous, or, you know, they don't hurt you as much on price when all the inferior technologies have been disqualified. So that would be my main advice around that.
That's great, Will, and I really love your point about sort of if you are working with state-owned businesses, getting in there and really you know, scoping things out with them. That's obviously a challenge right now with the COVID situation, but you have been doing some work that you've been able to deliver remotely. So could you just tell us a little bit about that and the challenges you faced in executing?
Yes, there's a twofold tech strategy there. Obviously, first thing is to meet with new customers. Now, because of COVID, people are in lockdown and working from home. They are a lot more open to video links, discussions like this one today. And we are able to set up a lot more meetings like that, and a lot quicker. And to be honest, it takes up less of your time. If you've ever traveled in Delhi from one customer to the next, you know that you lose 3-4 hours covering maybe 20 kilometers. But so we do that, and that's more acceptable now because of COVID. Then obviously, prior to that, we have set up our technology to be able to communicate with the cloud. We've set up a technology where we can remotely connect to the units, and we've also formulated for the customers who have equipment where there is no connection to the internet, and some state-owned companies do not like their equipment. You know, it's a security risk, and with cybersecurity being a big issue nowadays, that is not an option for some clients. For them, we've worked around a storage capacity in our equipment where we can download data that is relevant to what we need to do onto a CF card or on a CSV file that they can email to us, and we can then work on the problem and update the CF file, which they can then take back and upload into their machine. And then there's no remote connection. Obviously, that poses its challenges, but you know what I'm trying to say here is the technology is going to be your solution. Whatever your product is going to be, you need to think a little bit outside the box on how you can solve it remotely and continue on. For us, when COVID hit, we didn't want our customers to think we cannot support them and commission new equipment. Otherwise, our equipment sales would drop. And we're on a record here of sales purely because we can do that. And so we've really promoted something that was an option, a nice to have option before. Now it's become a necessity, that remote connection into the machine.
Fantastic. I think that's really great, and it must have been challenging, but it's a great example of how you can still do business in the current environment. So thank you very much for that, Will. I'm going to go to Tim shortly, but I just would like to note we've had a couple of questions come in. I'll get to those in a minute. We've had one around going a bit deeper on working with state-owned companies. So we'll come to that one in a minute. If you do have any more questions, we will have time after we hear from Tim about just for a couple more questions. So please put them in the chat. But let's go now to Tim. I believe we've had to make a little change due to some technical challenges, which happens from time to time. But we've got you there, Tim, just to hear from you in terms of what you're seeing from the Austrade perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, and hi, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay.
Great.
Good. Excellent. Look, thank you, and it's been a really fascinating discussion. I guess the first point I wanted to make, just to echo your comments earlier, Rob, is just to express our solidarity with the people of India and all our partners here. It's obviously a very difficult time at the moment. COVID surge is having a really major impact across the country, but we know that this is a country that is very resilient, and we know it will emerge strong from the crisis. So, just wanted to make that point to start with. I guess in terms of what we're seeing on the ground and the strategies that companies are looking to adopt, I think our panelists have covered it really well, actually. I don't have a lot to add, but I'll just make a couple of brief points. One is that it's really important to have an understanding of the broader industrial growth drivers in India. So we've spoken about, for example, the reforms in India's mining sector that allow greater private sector investment. I would say it's also really important to look at what's happening in the downstream industries, because ultimately we know that's going to drive growth. So, for example, we know on the renewables side, India is looking to expand to 175 gigawatts of renewable capacity by next year, and then again to 450 gigawatts by 2030. Now, that's going to require really significant investment across the whole battery value chain. And it's going to drive demand both for the raw materials that are inputs for that value chain, but also the services and technology that are required to stand it up. So that's the sort of, I guess, broader view that companies need to take when they're assessing their opportunities in the market. And just to say that in terms of, you know, the specific strategies that companies are using right now, we've heard about those from our other panelists. In the current environment, if you're looking at the India market, and of course Austrade is here through our offices to advise you, but it might mean looking at remote delivery options for services and technology. It will mean, as we've heard from our other panelists, working through trusted partners in the market. And of course, it's going to mean that you will need patience and a long-term commitment. But certainly, I guess another point that I'd make, the final point I'd make, is that Australia is very well regarded in this sector. We've got a long history of cooperation with India and METS going back several decades. We have, by our estimation, at least 40 to 50 Australian METS companies that are active in the market at the moment, including those on the panel today. So we're well regarded. The relationship more broadly is in a very good place. So certainly we think that those broader atmospherics do assist Australian companies when they're looking at the market.
Thanks very much, Tim. And of course, you know, Austrade is there to help if anyone does need any assistance and guidance. I want to pick up some of the questions that we've been getting in the chat and some issues that have also been coming out of the panelists' presentations. So the dealing with state-owned businesses is a real big one. We've had a lot of questions about that. Perhaps can I start with you, Niladri, and then I'll go to Simon after that for your views. So starting with you, please, Niladri.
Yeah, I saw this question on Indian mining being public sector dominated. The point that I wish to make is that yes, mine lease ownership is public sector dominated, but mining operations is definitely not public sector dominated. Much of the mining is actually completely contracted out. If you look at India's coal mines, the bulk of them are in the if I look at overall Indian mining, the bulk of the mines are in the coal sector, and the largest players, of course, are Coal India, and more than 70% to 75% of Coal India's mines production is actually outsourced. The same applies to non-coal mines, with the exception of 2 or 3 mines. They are largely private sector operated mines. So either through small mining contracts or through large MDOs. You will see a lot of small mining contracts. So it's not that you have to sell to the mine lease owner. As METS players, you can position your solutions to all these people who are operating these mines or providing services to these mines. And I think that is the way for METS players to avoid long payment and decision cycles. And yes, to the extent that you have to serve public sector companies, you have to be mentally prepared to for a longer working capital cycle.
Fantastic, thank you, Niladri. Simon, what's your view as a practitioner?
Yeah, look, I think Niladri makes a very good point that there is that majority back through mining consultants, if you like, or MDOs in India. We haven't quite seen the acceleration of that group into the very large platform space yet to drive their whole businesses from my perspective. I think that will come. I think we're seeing companies in Indonesia moving into that space more rapidly, perhaps, than those groups in India today. But I would fully expect that that shift would come. I think in relation to the state enterprises and, so in relation to some of the technology platforms that might sit behind or alongside the MDOs to help them manage their businesses, I think two things. One is that from time to time, it feels like the owners of the assets have subrogated their responsibility over to the MDO, and yet the most successful models we see around the world are where there is both. And understanding what the owner's responsibilities are and how they're going to manage that asset, along with the people who are then running that asset for them. And so I suspect there's some maturing to come through there at some point as we drive for maximum value out of the Indian mining market. The second one is probably about procurement and whether it applies to the MDOs or the gov parties. There is this very, very strong culture of an L1 or the lowest price that pervades this. And so this ability to maturely assess differentiated technology options and then make a purchasing decision, it is challenging. And that's all I can say, really, it's challenging. And that's from getting heard and understood through to actually being able to get the scoring of your quality, the value you can bring through to that procurement assessment. And look, I think that's, for me, it's a work in progress. And we'll continue to push that, because I think that is the path for Australian companies, is this combination of deep domain knowledge and technology in helping India's maturity of their industry come up.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Simon. I wanted to go back to you, Vanessa. You talked a little bit about critical minerals and rare earths. There's obviously an incredible focus in that area, both at the government level and the industry level. Where are the opportunities there for Australia working with India and sort of bringing together that value chain?
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Look, this is a space that clearly both our governments, the Indian government and the Australian government, and in fact the Quad of the US, Japan, India, and Australia, have really focused on critical minerals as a leverage point for our relationship. And it's in part driven by the fact that if you look at the manufacturing sector in India and what it currently makes around electronics, battery capacity, renewables, electric vehicles, and the future of those sort of manufacturing, and you look at what Australia has, we have every component that's required as feedstock to make those products. But at the moment, all of our rare earth oxides, effectively, and lithium is captive to the market control, which sits in China. So both our governments have actually, from a policy perspective, signed an MOU around critical minerals, and it's really part of the comprehensive strategic partnership that was agreed between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Morrison. The issue for us is how to make sure that we, as Australia, don't do what we do to everybody else, which is become the quarry and just hand over the resource. And equally, from an Indian perspective, we don't then tie ourselves to India as a driver to be self-reliant, but does not have the resources developed in the ground to do so. Here is a perfect partnership, provided we work through the value chain to say, well, here are the resources in the ground in Australia, which we have the capacity and the desire to develop. Here is the mobile phone at that end. Somewhere in that value chain is the right point where the partnership comes together. Very often we've dig it up, turn it into a concentrate, or don't add much value beyond shipping it out. And I think Australia's desire is to move further down the value chain so that we get to partner with a country like India in both delivering in part that renewable energy future, the electric vehicle future, but also the electronics, the medical imaging, the componentry that goes into what will shift quality of life for millions of Indians. So, you know, it's a fabulous opportunity. It's one that everybody is energised about. It's really important that our companies, both mining and METS in Australia, but also the manufacturing companies in India, find the path to come together and work through where does the partnership lie.
Thanks, Vanessa. I did just want to, we've got just a couple of minutes left, but I do just want to go back to maybe Will and Simon. We've had a couple of questions come through just around automation and the importance of analytics. And I know you've both got experience in that space. So just any particular views about how important that is from a product differentiation perspective?
Yeah, so that is quite important, finding the right value to provide to the client. And again, that is very similar to what I said earlier. You need to partner, you know, you find the right partner who's got the contacts, and that probably goes for government entities as well. If you find a partner in India that you can work with that already has the contacts, it shortcuts your learning curve. And then with the automation side of it, sorry, Rob, could you repeat the rest of the question there?
Oh, it was just how the automation can be a point of differentiation.
Okay, yeah. Look, you know, there's two things. The Australian market, you know, we've been in mining for a long time, and innovation is a big encouragement by the government. And certainly in our very niche industry, there's 5 big global competitors. 3 of them are Australian. And it's because of that innovation that we have the automation into mining and minerals processing that it can be useful to the Indian market. And in terms of that, and I'm sure Simon will agree here, you know, because of our limited workforce and the expense of workforce, automation is so critical to us. But on the flip side for India, this productivity that can be improved through automation obviously help you manage the number of people on site, because there's a large difference there, a large disparity. That helps you manage those people better and improve their safety through automation. And it is really a good focus point for, and I'm sure all the mines, you know, that we've spoken to, Coal India, NMDC, and the like, they're all thinking around those lines. It's the point of building that confidence in them to take that on.
Yeah, and the safety point's a really good one as well. Simon, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, look, I was going to look back on the safety, in particular in underground mining in India, which will develop over time. That I think automation just needs to be part of that story, and Australia is very well positioned to assist with that. And again, in the open cut, in a range of sectors, again, it'll be driven by production and productivity. So how do we get more tons out faster? And you know, and automation becomes one of those drivers for that in a range of particular circumstances, which perhaps help just lift some of the operations up to the next level of opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. Look, we are well and truly out of time today. So I want to thank all our participants for joining us. And I want to thank our fabulous panelists for speaking and sharing their thoughts today. Of course, today's event has come to you as part of the Australia-India Business Exchange, which is really focused on, you know, elevating engagement between Australia and India in the business space, and particularly building business literacy around India. So as part of AIBX, you know, there's a range of webinars which are being delivered over coming months. So we have another one coming up on the 27th of May on agribusiness. And then on the 10th of June, we have one on infrastructure. So, you know, if those are relevant for you and your business, we look forward to you joining us on those dates. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found today a really useful session. And please do share with us any feedback that you might have.